A single player flip a game that was already slipping away. And without forcing it, without panicking, just bending reality, 1 minute it's a double-digit hole. The next, the entire building feels different, and everyone watching knows they're seeing something new take control. 16 points down doesn't sound dramatic on paper. It sounds manageable. But in the NBA, on the road, against a young Houston team that feeds off chaos and momentum, 16 feels heavier than it looks. The Spurs felt it early, the crowd felt it, and for a stretch, Houston played like they had figured something out: speed, pressure, bodies flying at every possession, daring San Antonio to blink. They didn't blink, they waited. Because when you have a player who warps the floor just by existing, panic becomes optional. For Wembanyama didn't come out trying to dominate. That's the part people still miss. He didn't force touches, he didn't hunt mismatches, he let the game breathe. And that patience is what makes everything scarier. Houston threw different looks at him. Physical bumps, early contact, hands everywhere. The message was clear. Make him uncomfortable, make him rush, make him prove it again. Instead, he slowed the game down. There's no practice player in the league who can imitate what he is. That's not hype, that's a logistical problem. You can prep for shooters. You can prep for post scorers. You can even prep for freak athletes. But you cannot simulate a 7+ footer who moves like a wing, sees like a guard, and recovers defensively in half a second. You only learn in real time, and by then, it's already happening. The first shift wasn't loud. It wasn't a poster dunk or a heat check 3. It was positioning. A screen that forced a switch Houston didn't want. A cut that dragged help one step too far. A pass that looked simple until you realized no one else on the floor could have made it from that angle. The deficit stopped growing. Then it stalled. Then it started shrinking. And suddenly, the Rockets looked unsure. That hesitation spread fast. You could see it in the body language, glances toward the bench, half steps on closeouts, drives that started strong and ended in second thoughts. Momentum didn't just swing, it softened. Houston was still playing hard, but the confidence that fueled the early run had cracks in it, and once doubt enters the game, it doesn't leave quietly. That's when the physicality really kicked in. Houston tried to crowd him in the post, leaning into him early, daring the refs to call everything. He absorbed it. You could see flashes of frustration because he's human, but mentally, he stayed locked. There's a difference between being tough and being tough-minded. Wembanyama didn't try to win the fight. He waited for the moment the game had to become basketball again. When it did, he owned it. He started going inside out, not because the jumpers weren't falling, but because collapsing the defense changes everything. One hard roll, 2 defenders commit, the lane opens, a shooter gets rhythm. And now Houston's scrambling, rotating late, arguing with each other instead of setting up. On the other end, the impact was louder. Shots that looked clean suddenly weren't. Guards hesitated for half a beat too long. Bigs rushed floaters they normally take in stride. 5 blocks don't tell the full story. The altered shots matter more. The possessions where Houston didn't even try to finish at the rim, that's influence you don't see in the box score. By halftime, the energy had flipped. Not completely, but enough that you could feel it. The Spurs weren't chasing anymore. They were dictating. That's what separates potential from control. The third quarter was where the conversation changed. Wembanyama started running the floor harder, not for highlight dunks, but for pressure. When a 7-footer beats everyone down the court, it forces decisions. Do you pick him up early and leave someone else? Or do you protect the paint and hope he doesn't get the ball deep? Houston hesitated. San Antonio didn't. Easy buckets followed. Free throws. Second chance points. And with every clean possession, the Rockets' margin for error shrank. The lead disappeared quietly. Then came the moment that made it obvious this wasn't just another good game. Houston tried to go at him directly. No tricks, no help, just strength versus length. The shot went up. The result didn't matter because the message did. You could attack him, play him physical, even score on him occasionally, and he would still give you 28 points, 18 rebounds, and 5 blocks by the end of the night. That's the nightmare. Because if beating him up is the best option, and he still controls the game, what's left? San Antonio smelled it. The pace stayed steady. No rushing. No hero ball. Every possession felt intentional. The Spurs didn't suddenly become perfect. They became composed. And that's dangerous when your centerpiece makes everyone else taller, calmer, more confident. Houston, meanwhile, started pressing. Shots came earlier in the clock. Passes got riskier. The crowd tried to pull them forward, but momentum had already shifted. The Spurs erased 16 like it was a misunderstanding. By the final stretch, it wasn't about whether San Antonio would win. It was about how decisively. The scoreboard said 111-99, but the gap felt wider. The Rockets had energy. They had talent. What they didn't have was an answer for a player who changes the geometry of the game. And the league noticed. Because this wasn't just dominance, it was inevitability. The kind that makes analysts stop comparing and start rethinking categories. The kind that makes teams realize there's no Wembanyama plan, only survival strategies. And here's the part that should worry everyone else. This wasn't even him forcing his will. Because what happens when patience turns into aggression and the league realizes this version was him holding back? What happens when patience turns into permission? That's the real question teams have to answer with Victor Wembanyama. Because once he feels the rhythm, once the reads become automatic, the game stops being about adjustments and starts being about limits. Houston found that out in real time. Early in the fourth, the Rockets tried one last reset. Fresh bodies, more pressure on the catch, faster help from the weak side. On paper, it made sense. In reality, it created exactly what Wembanyama thrives on: movement. The moment the defense sped up, he slowed everything down again. Catch. One dribble. Eyes up. Someone cuts. Someone floats to space. The ball moves before the trap even forms. That's when you realize this isn't just size and skill. It's control. The Spurs stopped looking like a rebuilding team and started looking organized, almost surgical. Every possession felt connected. And at the center of it all was a player who doesn't need the ball every second to own the floor. His gravity was doing the work for him. Houston couldn't load up on the guards. They couldn't overhelp. And they definitely couldn't relax at the rim. So they settled. Mid-range pull-ups. Rush threes. Layups turned into floaters because no one wanted to test him late. That's not fear, it's calculation. Players make those decisions subconsciously. And once they do, the defense has already won. Wembanyama, meanwhile, kept picking his spots. One possession he'd screen and slip, forcing a switch that had no business existing. The next, he'd trail the play, step into a jumper just to remind you that backing off wasn't safe either. And when Houston finally overcommitted, when they tried to send two on the catch, the pass came instantly. No hesitation, no wasted motion. That's the part that's accelerating. People still talk about what he might become, but nights like this are about what he already is. A problem you can't prepare for. Analysts have said it openly, there's no scout team version of him. You don't have a practice player who's 7 feet tall, moves like a wing, and recovers like a rim protector. You don't get used to that. You survive it, then watch the film and realize how many things you couldn't even attempt. Houston tried to rough him up again. Early contact in the post, forearms on the catch, bumps on the roll, and yes, it got to him for moments. You could see it, a look at the ref. A breath held a little too long. But then the response came not emotional, just effective. He went straight through the contact, drew fouls, finished through hands, forced the defense to choose between being physical and being disciplined. They couldn't do both. As the minutes ticked down, the Spurs didn't rush the knockout. That's the quiet evolution happening here. Young teams usually speed up when they sense blood. San Antonio didn't. They played at the same pace they'd been building all night. The same pace that erased 16 without drama. That's how leads become real. The Rockets had moments, a tough finish here, a defensive stop there. But every time momentum tried to spark, it ran straight into length. A pass tipped just enough to disrupt timing. A drive discouraged before it even started. A shot altered into something uncomfortable. 5 blocks show up in the box score. Dozens of changed decisions don't. And then came the sequence that sealed it. Houston finally got a clean look at the rim. The kind you need when you're trying to swing a game late. The ball went up, and somehow, from an angle that made no sense, Wembanyama was there. Not fouling, not guessing, just meeting the ball at its highest point and sending it back. The possession after that, the Spurs scored again. That's when it broke. Not loudly, not with trash talk or theatrics, just a collective realization that the window was gone. The Rockets kept playing hard. They're built that way, but the outcome felt decided. San Antonio had crossed the line from comeback to command. When the final buzzer came, 111-99 felt almost understated, because this wasn't a hot shooting night stealing a win. This was structure beating chaos, patience beating pressure, and one player bending the game without forcing it. The conversation after wasn't about one highlight. It never is with him. It was about how you even begin to deal with this long term. Because in a playoff series, you don't get to hope he has an off night. You see him again, and again. And if he plays like a superstar consistently, that's the difference. That's always been the difference in this league. Good players raise your floor. Superstars decide series. That's why the comparisons keep coming. Not because he looks like someone else, but because the impact feels familiar. The way Shaq forced entire rosters to be built around stopping him. The way Duncan controlled games without noise. The way the truly elite make everyone else feel slightly late. And here's the part that should make the rest of the NBA uneasy. This version of Wembanyama is still choosing his moments. He's still learning when to attack and when to let the game come to him. He's still figuring out how much force is actually necessary. Nights like this aren't about maxing out, they're about efficiency. About understanding that domination doesn't always look explosive. Sometimes it looks inevitable. San Antonio didn't just erase a 16-point deficit. They showed what their identity could be when everything aligns. Steady pace, collective confidence, and a centerpiece who changes the rules without demanding attention. That's how potential quietly becomes problem. And the league felt it, because once players, coaches, and front offices start talking less about stopping you and more about surviving you, the takeover has already begun. And that's the scary part. It didn't feel like a peak, just another step forward. If you saw something different in this game, drop it in the comments. Hit like if this one made you rethink the league a little, share it with a hoophead who needs to see it, and stick around because this story's just getting started.